All right, let's give about another minute or so to settle in and let folks arrive. We still got people joining. And while we're at it, why don't we go ahead and just add in the chat, get the chat going. Where are you tuning in from? Okay, we got somebody from Italy. Welcome. Trinidad. Hi. Quebec. And just to check, can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. Jersey, UK, Serbia, Canada. Oh my gosh, I'm always so amazed by the turnout worldwide. It is the most beautiful thing ever. Edmonton, Canada, Southern Oregon. Hmm, beautiful. All right, I'm just gonna continue letting folks in. Beautiful. Yay, so I see some familiar faces and a lot of new faces. And also, I'm curious in the chat, what has inspired you to show up today? I'd love to hear. So today's talk is all about the health of maidens with the perspective of Chinese medicine. We have a lot to say about the health for maidens within our medicine. So I'm really excited to share with you. Wow, it's a really amazing turnout. So there's still some people rolling in. Okay, and let me pull up the chat. Venice Beach, Lancaster. Yay, Susie. Hi. So been on a wait list for a while and excited to find out more. Oh, you're so sweet. Anna, this work is so important. Agreed. I do a lot of work with women, but would love to focus on maidens and connecting to your power at a young age. Yeah, that's one thing that I hear a lot when I hold these circles is from the multi-generational spaces. One of the things that I get what's shared a lot is that I wish that I had learned this when I was a maiden. Yeah. So this week, the theme of seven came up. Ooh, and there you were in my inbox. So curious about cycles. Oh, I love how you like followed that invitation. I love it. Um, yeah, and Anna is sharing, I have to take my video off in a moment. Yeah, that's totally fine. We'll be here. Okay, I think we have one more person. All right. Yeah, so I don't want to take too much of your precious time. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and then you let me know that you can see it. Okay, maybe give like a thumbs up. Okay, actually, it's here. All right, does that look good for everybody? All right, so today's topic is maidens in Chinese medicine. So I've been teaching and facilitating maiden circles for quite a few years now, and at the beginning it was a little bumpy, I'm not gonna lie. I started actually teaching in an older age demographic, probably around like the 14, 15, 16 range. And slowly I started to kind of learn a lot about the receptivity. As we get a little bit older, the receptivity kind of closes down a little bit. And so I started to get curious about if it's a little too early to start teaching maidens about their bodies a little bit earlier, like around 10 and 11. And I experimented with it. I reached out to a lot of groups within my community, and they were very, very open to it. And so that's kind of how it started. And I just finessed my circles over time. And then I started to get asked about how to actually teach other facilitators how to hold them in their communities. And so that's how we're here today. So this is me. My name is Chris Gonzalez. I'm an acupuncturist and herbalist, and I'm in Claremont, California now. We just moved here a little less than a month ago, and I'm the owner of a company called The Way of Yin. And it's all about bridging the gap in reproductive health within the world right now, which there's a huge gap, I feel like, between Western medicine and us. And I feel like East Asian medicine really feels in that gap a lot of timeless wisdom. So we already asked this question, but feel free to continue to share in the chat. I'd still love to read that. Maybe if we have time later, or even in my free time later, I'd love to hear what inspired you to be here. All right, so today, I know this is probably new to a lot of people, so we'll take our time with it, and please feel free to ask any questions that come up for you. I'm here to answer all the questions. So we're going to talk about what's called the 7-year life cycles, menstruation as what's called the first of 3 golden opportunities. We're going to view our life cycles through the lens of nature, and specifically the 5 elements. We're going to talk about the rite of passage between what's called our wood years and fire years. So that's childhood all the way to puberty and young adulthood. What changes are actually happening in the context of Chinese medicine. And then, of course, the most important part, how do we support maidens through this rite of passage? Because it very much is the rite of passage. All right, so let's actually talk about the 7-year life cycles. So many of our classical texts within East Asian medicine talk about the 7-year life cycles, but in particular, there's one called the Su Wen, called the Simple Question. And what it does, it explains this maturation process of the reproductive cycle. So it explains after years and years and thousands of years of observation that about every 7 years or so, there's a shift that happens, an acceleration of the wheels. And these changes actually occur along the channels that all originate in the lower abdomen, in the uterus. So for females, it's 7-year life cycles. For males, it's 8-year life cycles. So here we're going to focus in on 7-year life cycles. So what drives the 7-year life cycles and the maturation of the reproductive system? It's a substance, the most dense substance that's within us, and it's called Jing essence. And there's a quote here by one of my mentors. Her name is Dr. Leah Andrews, and she explained that Jing is a concentrated creative power that's passed on to us by our ancestors and through our parents through egg and sperm. And you can kind of think of it kind of like DNA, but it's so much more than that. So Jing actually acts as our reserves of energy. It determines the trajectory of our lifespan. It resides in the kidneys, which is our root system in Chinese medicine. And so Jing is related to our hormonal and reproductive functioning. So just with that knowledge alone, it really highlights the importance of considering our Jing, getting to know our Jing, understanding the context of Jing in our day-to-day lives, because it has so much importance in our maturation, our hormonal health, and our reproductive functioning. And I think this is kind of a missing piece that we don't get context about when we're growing up. And it doesn't have to be within the context of East Asian medicine, but just a context for understanding that our energy is finite. It's not infinite. And so we have to do everything possible to kind of protect our energy, protect our resources. So you can think of Jing as a sort of savings account. So we don't want to burn through our Jing right away. Longevity is the goal, right? And so what we'll learn in a little bit is the three golden opportunities, and where Jing actually plays an influence in three essential opportunities to really enhance our health. So I'm going to pause here because I know for a lot of people, it's a new information. So I want to take it as slow as possible just to make sure that everybody understands what we're talking about before we move forward. So we talked about the 7-year life cycles, and that at the bridge of each 7-year life cycles, there's a bit of acceleration and maturation. And then we talked about the substance that really drives the 7-year life cycles, which is Jing essence. So I'm just going to take a look at the chat, make sure I'm not missing anything. Chantal, hi. Oh my gosh, everybody, please check out Chantal's book. Can you share a link to your book, please? Yeah, beautiful. So somebody from India. Beautiful. Holistic menstrual education. TCM perspective. Beautiful. Yay. Okay. Okay, so Chantel's cooking right now. So all right, so let's move forward. It kind of sounds like everybody understands at least those two concepts, just on the surface at least. So let's move forward. So let's talk about these two things in combination. So Jing essence is known to move in a cyclical manner, and that makes perfect sense because we are cyclical beings. And the 7-year life cycles, what it does is it really offers an insight into our natural ebbs and flows of our energy throughout our lives. And it highlights particular shifts and changes that occur about every 7 years or so. So it's not like a finite number, it's around 7 years, because you hear about things like early bloomer, late bloomer, that sort of thing. So it's not like every single 7-year mark right at your birthday or anything like that. It's just about every 7 years. So one exercise that I really love doing with my clients is mapping out their 7-year life cycles to see major life events that occurred around every 7 years. Because it's a bridge between kind of one cycle and the next 7-year cycle, it's a bridge. And what we know about bridges is that hopefully they're very integrous, but it's not as stable as being on solid ground. So there is a bit of vulnerability that happens as we shift because there's so many changes happening. So this is an opportunity to really enhance our health or it can actually harm our constitutions, especially when we don't have context for understanding those tender bridges. All right. So, as promised, let's talk about the 3 golden opportunities. And they're known as menstruation, postpartum, and perimenopause. That's where I'm at right now in perimenopause. I'm in my 6th 7-year cycle. Yeah, so we could talk about that a little bit later if anybody has any questions, but we are going to focus in on menstruation. So the 3 golden opportunities are just that. They are opportunities to really enhance our health because it gives us context for understanding Jing and considering Jing as a crucial part of our overall health. So through menstruation, we actually lose a little bit of Jing. So I'm just going to admit a couple more people. So menstrual blood is not the same as the systemic blood that runs through our system. Menstrual blood is known as Tiangui. I can write that in the chat. Tiangui. And it's translated as heavenly water. So it's literally the substance that nourishes every human on this planet. So menstrual blood is a manifestation of our Jing essence. And so it's a necessary shedding that happens every month so that we can cycle over and over again through shedding, rebirthing, building, shedding, and then over and over and over again, because that's how we sustain life, is through these cycles. But on the other hand, there are many scenarios where we lose too much Jing. We probably know or maybe have experienced heavy bleeding. And maybe you go to the doctor or your friends have gone to the doctor saying, hey, I think I'm bleeding too much. And they're just like, oh, that's just normal. That's normal. No, but I'm a little exhausted. Like I'm really, really tired. I'm fatigued. I can't think clearly. Well, that's just part of it. Part of being a woman, part of having a female body. So a lot of it is just disregarded. But in East Asian medicine, that Jing is precious. And we don't want to lose or leak our reserves of energy. So there is an amount that needs to be shed, but there is an amount that is too much, or that we can actually bleed too often or too long. Yeah. And so there's this whole art of cyclical attunement, of menstrual attunement that we can teach maidens from a really young age, just to kind of pay attention to how they're feeling, to how to read their blood. And it has lifetime benefits to it. So our greatest Jing loss is actually postpartum. There is a lot of energy that is allocated to conceiving, to gestating, birthing, and then also feeding our young. So the goal of postpartum within a lot of traditional cultures is to care deeply for the new mother so that they can fully recover. Because it's known in these traditional cultures that their recovery is beneficial to the entire community. So there's emphasis on lots of replenishment and a lot of recovery because that's the greatest Jing allocation or Jing loss is in postpartum. And the third golden opportunity, we'll just talk briefly about it here, is perimenopause. So essentially, puberty is when we enter in the cycles, the monthly cycles. And perimenopause is this really amazing, spacious opportunity for our bodies to acclimate and get used to transitioning out of those cycles. So we're going from being able to reproduce to no longer being able to reproduce. And that very much is a rite of passage. And so during perimenopause, the goal is to meet your body where it's at. We talked about earlier that puberty is a transition from wood to fire. Perimenopause is a transition from your earthy reproductive years into what's called your metal years. And metal, if we ever get an opportunity to be together again, is all about clarity. It's clearing away all the abundance, actually. It's getting really clear about what your values are, where you want to put your energy. Yeah, so as things start changing in your bodies, you want to get really clear about where you want to put your energy because your energy is actually changing. Yeah, so let's pause here again, and I'd love to answer any questions that come up for you. Okay, let's see. I'm just going to open up the chat. Yay, Chantel shared the book. Beautiful. So Evie is asking, so if we get it passed from our ancestors, does it mean if they have low Jing that we also have it low? Evie, this is an amazing question. So Jing essence has two aspects of it. So there's what's called pre-heaven essence. This is what we get from our ancestors and from our parents. It's kind of that inevitable inheritance that we get. But then we also have this other aspect of Jing. It's called post-heaven essence. And this is from the moment that you're in gestation and then you're born. This is an opportunity for you to replenish and build and nourish your own Jing essence through lifestyle, through nutrition. Yeah, and so I love this, how East Asian medicine frames this, is that you're not stuck with kind of this predetermined health profile, that there's so much opportunity to really enhance what you inherited. So you're not kind of like at the whim of your genetics, essentially. Yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah. All right. So, Kyla, what about bleeding during ovulation? Yeah, did you want to unmute yourself and maybe expand on the question? I'm not sure I'm understanding it.
Sorry that I said that while you were talking, so there was no context. But yes, first of all, I just want to say this is amazing. I feel like I'm learning so much. You mentioned that like your gin is something that needs to be replenished after your menstruation period. And I've noticed there have been times with seed cycling that I've been able to keep it at bay, but I get like pretty heavy bleeds sometimes mid-cycle. Is that the same gin being lost? Is that the same like heaven's water that I'm kind of releasing in that time? And I'm curious from a traditional Chinese medicine standpoint, like what the root of that could be, because I thought I got rid of it and then it's kind of pesky and it came back. So
Yeah, so mid-cycle bleeding, so that is kind of breakthrough bleeding, and it is part of your gene. Yeah, so mid-cycle bleeding could happen for a few different reasons. It could be from deficiency or excess. So sometimes if it's excess, it's heat. So heat in what's called the heart, and this could have possibly an emotional component to it. Um, when we bleed, you can think of it almost like a release. It's a release of something that could be built up. And there's such an intimate connection between the heart and the womb that sometimes mid cycle, when that's the element of summer, it's the element of fire, sometimes there's a little bit of a buildup of heat to where the body just needs some sort of release at that mid cycle moment. So that's one thing. The other thing is more of what's called a deficiency. So the spleen and kind of the digestive organs are responsible for kind of containing and holding blood. And so we need a lot of chi energy to be able to hold and contain. And so sometimes if we have what's called chi deficiency, when it comes time for that big expansiveness at ovulation, our bodies, if they're chi deficient, can't contain it and hold it. And so there'll be a little breakthrough bleed too. Yeah.
That was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, Tamar. Hello, love. All right. So Tamar was actually part of the very first round of the Circle Facilitator mentorship last year. Just wanted to say that she's doing the most amazing, beautiful things in her community. So my issue with first years and continuing menstruation was bleeding too little or not at all, which I have now found 20 years later was due to PCOS. Yeah, so menstruation is a physiological, natural process of an opening, a shedding. So, shedding is a cleansing that happens naturally because, in order to have a cycle that creates life, we need the shedding as well as the building. So if we don't have the shedding, then things can build and build and build and build and create a lot of stagnation. So this is exactly what Tamar is expressing here. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So Canoe, do maidens have cycles, inner seasons? Like menopausal women can have cycles according to the moon. Can maiden also have those too? Absolutely. So we are all cyclical beings and we all relate to nature. And so even though they might not be cycling monthly as along like a menstrual cycle, they're still cycling with the life cycles that still have concentric circles that fall in line with the elements. So we're all cycling all of the time through these amazing concentric circles, and we're all at different places at different times. Yeah. Wow, these are amazing questions. Um, okay, so France, perimenopause, fifth cycle question mark. Yes. So perimenopause, um, yeah, at the fifth life cycle, it said that the chi and blood of our bodies really start to change. And chi and blood, you can kind of think of them like hormones. So at the fifth cycle, so around age 35 is where things start to slowly start to change. Not to say that you're full in perimenopause, but just as like seasons are like these really distinct seasons, they have transitions in between them. We don't go straight from like summer to winter, right? There's like all of this breadth of time so that we can actually acclimate to it. So I know that when people hear a lot of times like, oh no, 35, that's too soon, you actually want this transition time to be super, super spacious because we don't want it to feel like we're falling off of a cliff, right? So if we have the context of knowing, okay, like around the fifth year cycle or fifth cycle, my body is probably going to not adapt to stress as well. Maybe my digestion might shift a little bit, which actually helps to create Qi in blood. These are all amazing things to know ahead of time so that you can then meet your body in those changes and boost your constitutions rather than be succumb to the changes without any context whatsoever. Yeah. So let's see. So Mahati, I hope that I pronounced that right. I think the first cycle is counted from when puberty is, so maybe 49. So yeah, so the fifth life cycle is 5 times 7, 35. If I'm doing if I'm doing the math
Oh,
correctly,
I was
please do not quote me on math. Honestly,
sorry.
I'm horrible
Yeah.
at it. My son's got the gift of math, but I did not.
I joined a
So
little
five
late.
times seven.
Yeah, I was
Hi.
trying to understand if it was about like menopause itself, or I guess I'm understanding now perimenopause is a transition towards that direction. So I was just trying to connect the dots I had. I'm sorry I joined a little late and I had some technical difficulties, but yes, my name is Mahati and I'm noticing that I'm happy to be here. So that tells me I joined the right thing.
Yay. Yeah, so cycles. Oops, I accidentally muted myself. Yeah, so with the life cycles, I feel like a lot of times menopause gets hmm, it's like we conflate words. And so it's almost like perimenopause kind of gets ignored and we just talk about menopause. But perimenopause is so, so important because it's that transitional time before we actually, menopause is like an event, an actual event where you hit the 12-month mark of, okay, I haven't had periods or cycles for 12 months. And on that 12-month mark, that's menopause. You are officially in menopause. So that journey beforehand, that's perimenopause. Yeah, which is very much a rite of passage, just like menopause. Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Okay, so we are making really good time. So let's go forward. All right, so I know that this is a lot to take in, so maybe we can actually sit back in our seats and maybe not even pay attention to the words at first. Just notice the colors and the shape. Maybe we see some ovals, some triangles, some squares. And then when you feel ready, just allow the words just to come to you and just see what you notice. Yeah. So I always like to start with water. So this is one way to learn about the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, which are water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. So let me go to the next slide because they all relate to each other. So wood feeds fire. Fire creates earth. Earth bears metal. Metal generates water. And water nourishes wood. And it keeps going around and around and around and around. And everybody's going to get a copy of the slides. Yeah, I don't know if that helps. So you don't have to feel like you have to write too many notes down. Yeah, so let's start in the element of water. So water has everything to do with the root. It is like the mystery. And it's the place of the womb. This is like the watery womb, our initial home. It is related to the winter season. So it's the yin of yin. It's darkness. And within darkness, there's mystery, but there's also so much wonder and possibility. And as far as the menstrual cycle, it is related to our menstruation. So our bleeding days, essentially. It's our inner winter time. And with the life cycles, of course, it's our initial home, the womb. But then when we come full circle, we reach eldership, our wise years. And so water nourishes wood. And so that really makes sense because in nature, that's what it does. It nourishes wood and things grow. And so from winter up comes spring. So spring is correlated to the wood element. It's all about rebirth, new beginnings. And so as far as life cycles, it's birth to childhood. So we're birthed into the world, and spring wood energy is very childlike, super playful, curious, full of yang energy. And within our menstrual cycles, after menstruation comes pre-ovulation. So things are slowly growing. And then the next element is wood feeds fire. So it provides that fuel for yang to continue to grow to its peak. So it has to do with the summer season and ovulation. It's the peak of yang. So sometimes this energy coming from water to wood to fire can go too fast. And so we might have what's called like a short follicular phase, right? And so a lot of times what needs to happen is we need to really root down in water to make sure that the growth is happening in a really rooted way. So it's not just like boom, going too fast. Yeah. So this is the life cycle that we're really focusing on here for maidens, is the wood to the fire years. So in life cycles, the fire represents puberty, so menarche, and then early adulthood, which is the time of exploration and budding sexuality. We start to venture in building relationships outside of the home. Yeah, so it's a really expansive time. So with fire, we then move to earth. So a lot of times the five elements, they're shown like this with earth in the center, or it's shown with earth right here in between fire and metal. So if you do a quick Google search, you'll see them represented in both ways. So with earth in the center, this represents our body, where all of the elements are happening. With earth is kind of like this anchor. And I'll talk about Doyo in just a minute, but earth really represents our reproductive years. So this is the most kind of stable time in our lives. We might be deepening into our relationships, deepening into community, maybe finding a career for ourselves, maybe starting to build a home. Yeah, so that's like our earthy reproductive years where we really start to accumulate a lot. There's lots and lots of abundance that happens here. So Doyo period, that just means in between. So you can think of Earth as like a pivot. Earth is there as like this anchoring element where all the other elements kind of dip into for resource in order to move into the next. It's always dipping back into earth like this. Yeah. So that's what doyo means. So earth is really important. We need to take care of our pivots, our bodies. Yeah. And earth has everything to do with digestion. So digestion is a real anchor in being able to actually shift in transition. So if transitions are hard for you, as they are for me, full admission, it's always been a thing since I've been young. I need a lot of time to check in with my body to make sure that my digestion is super anchored in as I transition through things. Yeah. So from earth, we move to the metal element. So if we think about earth that's super, super compacted, like in the mountains, we can find crystals and gems and precious metals. And this is where refinement happens. And so from ovulation, we move to the other side of the menstrual cycle. And we come into what's called the premenstrual time. But in the life cycles, we're coming into what's called our metal years. So this is the perimenopause phase. So the theme of metal, there's a kind of contraction that happens. It's an internal process that happens, a drawing in. And that's really necessary because we can't be in this place all the time. That's not sustainable. To be in this young, outward, expressive, our bodies are so intelligent to know that we need periods of rest as well to recover. So that's the power of metal. It has us seek clarity to get super clear on what we're able to do and not able to do. And that's okay questions to ask because we can't do everything all of the time. Maybe we can do everything some of the time, but not all of the time. And so I really think of metal as like this gift. There's like these precious pearls of wisdom that can be gained from the metal element. That this kind of internal contraction that's happening is a way for us to really parse out how to allocate our energy. And so maybe you can actually relate with the premenstrual time where we do get a little bit more tense. There's like a tension that happens as we're holding before our bleed, because that's when progestate, that's a holding type of hormone. There's a little bit of tension that builds that actually asks us to get super clear on what we're able to do and not able to do, and to get really strong in our boundaries. Yeah. So I don't call it like premenstrual syndrome. I like to call it premenstrual strength because I feel like it helps us inhabit this strength to build really good boundaries. All right. And so then we come full circle. We go from metal back to the water element, where after autumn comes winter. After the premenstrual phase comes menstruation. And after perimenopause comes menopause. But I just want to point out that it doesn't end here. We go around again. And so you might have noticed something called second spring. So second spring is after our menopause years. We're kind of invited to dream again. You know, our bodies are not so busy with reproduction. And our energy is now freed up because to actually reproduce and be able to reproduce and to cycle every month and to ovulate every month, our bodies get a little tired of that. It's very energy, um, there's a lot of energy expenditure there. And so now in menopause and being in our elder years in that kind of watery element again, we're able to like kind of dream about what we want to manifest into the second half of our lives. And so that's what second spring is. We're coming back to our second time around into spring. Yeah. So that's how East Asian medicine frames post-menopause. It's our second spring. And I feel like I love that context so much better than like, oh, you're useless after menopause, you're an aged person and you have nothing to offer, and blah, 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 all those kind of messages. Now we have a new one that we can inhabit. Yeah. All right. I know that was a lot. Yeah, so I just want to open it up for questions. Oh, Ashley is asking, what about PMDD? Yeah, so PMDD, um, what I've known about it and what I'm learning more about, because I feel like it's also this thing that doesn't get talked about enough, is that there's a lot of nervous system component to PMDD. So I have a colleague, her name is Marissa, who knows a lot more about it. So I can send you a resource later on when I send out the replay, who has like a lot more information on PMDD. So the way that we approach it in Chinese medicine, of course, we have like diseases, as we know, in Western medicine. But in Chinese medicine, we see them as patterns. And so each individual person is not going to present the same way with PMDD. And the patterns kind of influencing PMDD are not going to be the same for each person. So that's what I love about our medicine, is that we treat the individual as they're presenting, and we treat the patterns. We don't treat like the disease or yeah, if that makes sense. Yeah. But what I've learned about from Marissa is that it has like a really, really deep nervous system component to it. Yeah. All right. Kanu, what does TCM say about endometriosis? So endometriosis, I'm not sure if everybody knows what that is, but that's tissue, um, like the endometrium that usually lines the inside of the uterus, kind of migrates outside of the uterus and maybe can show up in many different parts of the body. And so when you're cycling and your endometrial lining is shedding, those places, other places where the endometrial tissue has migrated are also shedding. So you can just imagine how like you can just have so much compassion for anybody who experiences this. It's really painful. Um, yeah, so how TCM sees this is, of course, stagnation, but then it could also be either hot or cold, like a hot or cold condition. But ultimately, it's a level of stagnation that needs to be moved or transformed. So that's how we actually treat it within our medicine. So, of course, it's with pain management through acupuncture and pain management and transformation with herbal medicine. Yeah. All right. So, Kyla, I love how deep yet digestible this was. Yeah. Awesome. Also, it makes me excited for perimenopause. Women's bodies and cycles are super cool. I know. Yeah, I would say I'm actually turning 45 on August 1st, and I would say I feel like the 40s are my favorite. I know that's not everybody's experience, but the 40s are I don't know, it just kind of feels like you accept and know, at least for myself. I accept and know myself better now than ever before. Yeah. Mhm. All right. So we went through this slide. And so since you're going to get the slides, this is just another way to map out. I'm all about like charts and maps and all of that. So this is just another way to see um, the concentric circles and the resonances of each of the elements. Yeah. All right, so let's get to the good part, the nitty gritty of why we're all here. Let's talk about maidens and what's happening. So with this cycle, age 7 to 13, that's the wood phase. And there's a lot of growth happening because when we're in the water element going into wood, water element is yin. And so from yin, we birth yang. So that's the wood element. It's the birth of yang from yin. And so there's lots of rapid growth that happens. So we can think about like in the springtime, when we plant seeds, like all the sprouts coming up everywhere, there's lots of rapid growth happening. And so as I explained, like we don't want that growth to happen too fast. So how we do that is we root down into the kidneys. So there's lots of nourishment into the kidneys. Um, in like our childhood years, that is super important. So the root system can be nourished not only through food, not only through nutrition, it's also with deep security and love and safety. That is so crucial for development. Yeah, so that we're not feeling at a young age that we have to grow up too fast, right? Yeah. So around this time, Jing begins to kind of stir, and the pituitary gland is being activated, and the tiangwei, our heavenly water, is concentrating. And so then when we actually transition into the fire years, we're entering what's called when the red dragon descends. It's monarchy, when we have our first bleed. And so this is the transition that we really want to support. And so as much as like we need context to understand things, maidens also would love to have that context to understand, what's gonna happen, how am I gonna feel? There's so many questions at these maiden circles that are so adorable and genuine. I'll share a lot of the questions that they ask. They ask, is it going to hurt? Am I going to be a changed person? Am I going to think differently? Is my brother going to have a bleed? All these really interesting questions come through. Yeah. All right. So how do we support this rite of passage? Through embodied education, harnessing creativity, and building community. So what I have found when I hold these circles, it's when you actually build rapport and relate to them, because as cyclical bodies ourselves, ones that have gone through many cycles, the more that you can build rapport, the more they're going to be able to relate to you. And the more that you can harness creativity in these circles, the more they're going to feel it kind of in their bodies. So the more creativity, the more embodied it feels. And doing in a group where it's multi-generational. So maybe their grandparents are there, their siblings are there, their closest friends are there. So it feels super cozy. really safe to just ask all the questions. Um, Usually we're always on the floor doing things, so it feels super grounded, super playful. Um, yeah, so after years and years of facilitating these circles, yeah, like I mentioned before, I've been asked, well, how do I hold these circles within my community? Am I even qualified? That was the big one. Am I qualified to do this? Absolutely, you're qualified to do this. I think if your intention is there and you're open to kind of learning, um, I created this whole kind of course to where we do it week by week, what I teach the maidens week by week. And so that's what I wanted to share with all of you. Yeah, so I wanted to open up for questions about the Circle Facilitator mentorship that I have coming up that starts July 30th. And please feel free to like unmute yourself and ask questions about it. What are you curious about? Are there any kind of insecurities that you have about being able to actually facilitate circles in your communities? I would just really love to hear what those concerns are, what your ideas are, what your questions are. Yeah, so I think we have a little bit more time. So either like raise your hand or put it in the chat. Yeah, Mahathi, go ahead.
Oh, great. So I really love this idea of building a community, like a circle, like a conversation circle that's multi-generational. I think that involves that kind of cyclical like touch points, because if you have people in different stages, they can share kind of their insights and you can look a little bit ahead and also share like what your experiences were in recent times, because products and the landscape are evolving. And like environmental kind of impacts and like cultural insights are evolving. And I'm hearing like just the inherent process of it is going to be cyclical in the forward direction too. It's not just the focus on the maidens. I'm seeing also that, you know, the conversation having existed lends itself to these conversations continuing into the next cycles, which I think is promising.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one interesting thing that I've noticed in all the maiden circles that I've held is that the moms and the grandmas are actually also taking notes, which is amazing. And then, then they'll come up afterwards and just say, like, I'm learning so much. And so it does really feel circular like that. It's like healing is happening on so many different levels. Yeah, beautiful. Kyla, do you want to unmute and share?
Yes, and I was actually going to speak to that. Like, this is very healing work. I just think back to I was born in the States, but my mother's family is all from Trinidad. And during my time here, the last 2, 3 years here, I just keep thinking about, how different it was from my grandmother growing up in like a British colony here on an island as a woman of color. It's just so interesting. And I constantly think about like how I want to give back to women specifically here. And I definitely feel like I'm not qualified to be doing that. But at the same time, like the work that I do now is I work in the beauty space. So I'm working with women all the time. And this is like, it's one of those things where it's like kind of treated like it's its own silo when really this is just so integrated in our lives. So I think this is really exciting. The idea of like multiple generations being there is exciting, but I would like to speak to people on this and just like share this knowledge and kind of like get the ball rolling, but I wouldn't even know really where to start with that.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, as far as like that kind of feeling of not feeling qualified, I think that's a really big one. And what you just shared there is like it almost feels like this reclamation of how this information was shared before, which was in community, in multi-generational spaces from your elders and from the people in the community. And so we are that, so now we just have to reconnect with our communities. That's essentially what it is. And then just reclaim almost kind of like what's innately already known, and then just remind ourselves, really. Yeah.
I think a lot of like wisdoms are being like awakened right now. And this
Mhm.
definitely feels like one of them. So I'm excited about this. I'll definitely dip my toe in a little further. This is fun.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out and email and ask all the questions. We're here. Yeah. Susie, hi, love. You want to share?
Yeah, hi, my love. Um, I'm just really interested. So you were saying about multi-generational and them feeling like that, finding it easier to share and things like that. I was thinking the opposite, like how kids like clam up with with older people there. And I think when you started, you were saying something about the age group that you tend to find is kind of like the sweet spot for educating. Could you just go over that again?
Yeah, I think in all kind of the lifespan education courses that I've taken is that the younger you are, the closer that you actually feel to like your grandparents and your cousins and stuff like that. And as we move from wood to fire, there's like this kind of natural thing that happens where we venture out a little bit beyond our families for influence, right? And for experience. And so the receptivity of kind of like the people within like your kind of family hub really expands and opens. And so I find that the age group that the receptivity is a little bit more accessible is when they're a little bit younger, almost like before they actually experience menarche. And so before I started working with that group, I really questioned, I was like, gosh, are they ready to like learn about this? Um, and so I'm just like really blown away by what they're actually able to capture and also relay back as far as like when we share about that they are nature and like the moon cycles and you cycle, they get it. They get it. And when you relate their bodies to nature and the elements, they get it. Um, yeah. And so when you have these multi-generational spaces and uh, the group that I tend to kind of focus on is the younger group, they love having their grandparents around. Um, that's just what I found. It might be different in different spaces, but that's just kind of what I found. Yeah. And not every circle has been with grandparents. It's, aunties are sometimes there. Friends of their mom are there. Yeah, so it's all different kinds of spaces. It just depends on the kind of group that you're working with. Yeah. hmm Yeah, but that receptivity piece right at the beginning, I almost like um and not that I had like a bad experience, but I always kind of prided myself on being able to relate to many different types of people in different age demographics. But I learned so much after the first circle that I had. And I was like, whoa, I have a lot to learn, you know? Yeah. And so I continued to work with that age group for a little bit. And then I just started to ask questions and they would actually honestly share with me, maybe if this was like a few years ago, I would have been a little bit more open, you know? And so they just felt kind of already clammed up because they hadn't had the context before of understanding. They hadn't been held and honored as it was like a rite of passage. And so it kind of felt like things closed up a little bit as far as like sharing around that topic. Um, yeah, it didn't seem like that was like an area that was really open to be talked about. Like it had already closed because culture had closed it for them, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let me see who has their hand up. Oh yeah. Mahati, do you want to unmute yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a question about, so I know this is kind of like you kind of sense it out and kind of make a decision type thing. But in your experience, would you recommend like including like even younger children in the conversation if they feel like they're curious, or would you recommend holding off until like they're in a more similar age bracket? Because I feel like that was part of the unnecessary mystique when I learned. Like I hadn't realized my mom had been wrapping her pads in toilet paper, and just I didn't know until she had the conversation with me. And then culturally we have this ceremony where like, you know, you bring together like a group of women, and like the only people who were invited were people who were menstruating and older. So there's no one younger invited. And I felt like that was again kind of keeping up this barrier of knowledge. And meanwhile, like I had started carrying a pad around my backpack in case one of my classmates needed it, because one of my like friends started menstruating when in elementary school. And I know that's a lot more common now with the whole like hormonal upheaval in um, dairy, among other things.
Okay. Yeah, I would actually engage the group that you're like approaching or approaching you. I've had circles where there's like babies around, little toddlers around. Um, I mean, there's lots of births that happen with the other younger siblings that are there, you know, awaiting the birth of their brother or sister, you know. Yeah, I would check in with your comfort level
Yeah.
in facilitating and holding that circle with lots of different age brackets. And then
Mhm.
also asking the group that you're working with, like, what are their preferences? What are they comfortable with? And then also just naming that you're comfortable if these people are also there. Yeah.
Yeah, I just felt like there's an opportunity to shift it because you can always speak to the amount of like what's appropriate. But I just felt like it's not necessary to keep it a complete mystery because I felt honestly betrayed when I'm like, you've had a period my whole life, and like I've had like siblings, and like I'd watched, you know, her like with her maternities, and then you know like things like you know miscarriages I understand are sensitive and like kind of personal, but
Mm,
the existence of these things that you know I'm like, how did I not know you were buying pads and using pads my whole last life? And then I'm like, what?
yeah.
Yeah,
That's how I felt about nursing. I was like, how come no one told me it was going to be this hard? Why is there so much silence around this? That's how I felt when I first started nursing my first. I was like, where are the conversations, like just in the general sphere about nursing?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Thank
Yeah.
you for doing this work. I don't know what prompted this, but I'm glad somehow I found my way here.
Yay! I love that. Okay, so let me just show the next slide just to show you what the 5-week mentorship will look like. So there is an option to have a certification at the end. So certification at the end is just basically, you know, turning in some of the assignments, practicing some of the verbal prompts, um, and taking some quizzes just to make sure that, you know, there's certain things that are kind of checked off. And so that's an option. It's not necessary to do in order to hold uh, circles and facilitate circles. But, you know, just for yourself, I've had some people say, hey, Chris, are you offering a certification? So that is an option, but it's not necessary. So it's 5 weeks. We meet every Tuesday for 2 hours. And basically, the first week, we are kind of checking in with ourselves and why we want to do this work. And also just dreaming. It's a dreamy week, essentially, where we're going to dream up what we envision initially, and then that might change as the weeks actually progress. And so the next 4 weeks are essentially going to be how I facilitate my circles when I facilitate the circles. So week by week, I'm literally going to walk you through what I do. And so it's really kind of a launch pad for you to gain ideas, um, and also interject your ideas of how you envision, how you want to hold your circles. Because I think that's a really important component to actually put a lot of you into it as well. And your culture, how you grew up, um, and maybe even asking maybe opening up conversation to your maternal lineage and asking questions to your mom, your aunts, your grandma, just opening up that dialogue, I feel like would be really beautiful. Yeah. So that's that. So I think that, I don't know if Sam's here, my assistant, but I think for a week or 2 weeks there, it's on early bird. So right now it's 277 for the 5-week program. And then we begin on July 30th and we'll meet for 5 weeks. Yeah. So I'm gonna go to the chat and just see if, oh my gosh, Tamar just shared an image of a circle she held. Oh my gosh. Ah, it's so beautiful. Okay, I'm just gonna go up, up, up. Yay, I love how you are all talking to each other on here. Um, okay, and Demetria says, yes, Susie, 40s. So glad I'm writing it with you. Okay, Evie, do you have some suggestion for women to build their blood and sustain their body after bleeding? Yeah, so just pretty simply, in order to nourish blood, we need to create the space for rest. So rest during bleeding, resting as much as possible during bleeding. Not that you have to stop everything completely, but it's just energy allocation. Like, do I want to put my energy into that? Maybe not right now, kind of a thing. Lots of blood nourishing foods. The body is very receptive to warmer foods at the time. So, like, think teas and soups and porridges, that kind of thing, with lots of blood building, iron building foods. Yeah, because essentially that's literally what's happening. We're losing iron, we're losing lots of nutrients at that time. So, yeah, just lots of blood building foods. Um, Emma, I have a few friends now, and their daughters began bleeding super early, even around 9 and 10. Is there any insight for this? Yeah, so as Mahathi was sharing, is that our environment, our bodies as female bodies are especially sensitive to the environment because of the estrogen component. Estrogen and our bodies are a little bit built with a little bit more fat tissue. And so the environment really has more of an effect on female bodies, unfortunately. So we just have to be aware of this. Yeah. So let's see. So I guess for that, you know, I don't know how close you are with your friends, but if they're curious about knowing, it's definitely an environmental component. Yeah. Um, I love how you explain it. My question is how to convince them to treat the blood as sacred fluid when they see it as gross. You know what? So a part of building rapport, you're gonna get laughs, you're gonna get giggles, you're gonna get like eye rolls, and that's just kind of all part of it. So as far as building rapport in these circles, you validate their initial responses. You validate that because maybe culturally they've learned that. But at the same time, you're also helping them see it from a different perspective. So, how we kind of frame it within the course is that it is a health barometer, just like your blood pressure, just like your temperature. Um, yeah. And so, when you start to frame it as like this is a reading of how your health is, then you slowly start to shift their perspective on like, it's not gross, it's just something naturally that happens that maybe I just need to start paying attention to now. And then when you start to move into conversations of seeing it as like the actual fluid that nourishes every single person on the planet, that's kind of a superpower, like you slowly start to shift it a little bit. Yeah. So Thank you. Where can I find more information on how to become a facilitator? So I can share the link. Yeah, actually, after I send out the email, I'll send out an email with the replay. But here, let me put it in the chat. I don't have this like ability in chat to send it to everybody. Okay, let's see. Okay, ian.com. So that's my website. Can everybody see that? Yeah, so under courses, you're gonna see yeah, maidens and menstruation. And that kind of lays out all of the information, and it has the link for the early bird. So you can find it that way. And I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody's questions. Okay. Yay. Yes, follow each other on Instagram, connect, build community. I also had no clue that my mom had periods. Yeah. Chantal, another advantage of holding circles at an earlier age is that they get to cross the threshold and celebrate their first periods together. Yeah, and so that's kind of week 5, what we go over. While we're all together, we have them kind of dream up how they want to celebrate their first bleed. Like some people might want to have a big party and celebration. Some people just might want to have something intimate with maybe just a few friends. Some maidens just said, I just want to spend like a spa day with my mom, so they're gonna dream up how they want to honor their first bleed. Yeah. But Tamar, I just attended a Native American coming of age ceremony on Standing Rock Reservation and was the most beautiful thing I have seen of women supporting women. Yay. But it was so amazing. You have to go check out Tamar's Instagram page if you want to share that in the chat. Tamar is so beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. And then an image right here. So, Ashley, can you share more on the weekly curriculum, what each week covers? Yeah, so right down here, intention building, as I mentioned, is all about really kind of checking in with ourselves to see what brings us to this work, what inspires us to actually show up. Yeah, and then what I found last year is that there was so much healing actually happening on an individual level in connecting with our own inner maiden that happens. So that happens kind of like right at the get-go in week 1, intention building. Week 2, we connect to nature. We go into how we're connected to the moon, how we're connected to like 50% of the population. And then we slowly start to kind of tap into the very beginnings of how we're connected to the earth and the seasons. And week 3, we start to build upon that to where we are connecting nature with our bodies and start to connect that the cycles that are outside of us are actually within us. And so then we start to really map out each one of our menstrual cycle phases. Yeah, and then week 4, we start to kind of hone in on each one of those seasons, inner seasons, and kind of the best care practices to really take care of ourselves in each one of those inner seasons, and really embrace the idea that we're not the same all the time, and that's okay. So that's kind of a big message coming out of it. Yeah, and then week 5, we really hone in on asking the maidens about who they feel in community with and how they feel best supported, and then go into how they want to really celebrate their first bleed. Yeah. So that's the breakdown. Yay. So Lissad, yay. So Chinese medicine student. in SD just wanted to say thank you. I saw this in my email. I'm so happy I joined. Yay, I hope you join us. Beautiful. All right, so how long does each maiden circle last? What length of time seems to hold their attention? Yes, so that's another big consideration because of the age group and attention span. So yeah, I usually have I kind of played around with it, and sometimes we do go a little bit over time, but usually it's about a few hours for 4 weeks. So 1 day a week every week. So like let's say it's on like a Monday or a Saturday, and we'll meet for a few hours every Monday or Saturday for 4 weeks. Yeah. So usually we'll spend like an hour um kind of chit-chatting and talking and presenting all the material, and the other half is doing art projects, and I'll present all the things that we do. And I'd love to hear what you guys come up with as far as like creative projects for them to do to help it feel embodied. Yeah. All right, loves. Yay. So that's all I have for you. Yeah, so let me write down my email as well so that hello@awayofbeing.com. Yeah, so if you have questions, yeah, don't hesitate to ask. Please express any kind of reservations or insecurities that you have, and we can kind of talk through them. And if you have any questions, feel free to send them my way.
Question.
Oh.
How long are these sessions?
They're 2 hours. Yeah, so they're 11 o'clock on Tuesday Pacific time, and they go for 2 hours. Yeah.
Thank you. And then there's still time to enroll, right?
Yeah, so we're not starting until July 30th, so there's plenty of time. Yeah. Beautiful. All right, loves. It was amazing being with you today. There were such amazing questions. You were really engaged. And yeah, send questions my way. And yeah, I hope that you join us. All right. Okay, we'll see you at the next talk.